US President Donald Trump has vented his frustrations today as European leaders resist his calls to help the US secure the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump has reiterated his request, calling on China, South Korea and Japan in particular, who he says get a large percentage of their oil through the strait. Melissa Conley-Tyler is with the University of Melbourne's Asia Institute and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Melissa.
Good afternoon, Roth.
So can we start by looking at the countries Donald Trump has highlighted? He wants Japan and South Korea to step up, and also China, which is a strange request, isn't it, given one of its major strategic partners is Iran?
I think what he's going for are who are the countries that have been most affected by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And, we can see that countries which are dependent for overseas oil are the ones who are going to be most hit. In the case of these three, for South Korea, they've said they will consider. For Japan, they've ruled it out, and that has to be the case under Japan's current constitution, which is a post-World War II constitution that says that Japan can only have a self-defense force. It cannot have a military force that can go into other arenas. I find the China one very interesting, and I think what it shows to me is a lack of understanding of the way China has been seeing this. For decades, Chinese military thinkers have seen this as one of the two choke points that could prevent China's development, Strait of Hormuz and Strait of Malacca. If either of those are blocked off, that means that China as an oil-dependent country would be in terrible trouble. Now, they've been doing so much about this. They've been investing in renewables. We have whole Chinese cities which only have electric cars now. They've been investing in overland routes, and so that's where something like China's Belt and Road Initiative comes from, is to make sure that they're not going to be hit by this. So they are in no way as badly hit as the US or, say, India are by this situation.
And how much are we hit here in Australia by this?
A lot. Again, for Australia, the sea lines of communication are absolutely vital for us. Australia said that we will not send a ship, so that's been made clear. I think we have a strong interest in a diplomatic solution to this, and I've got to say, if real people weren't actually involved in this, I'd almost be finding it funny to watch Donald Trump in real time realise that all this disdain he has for diplomacy and all this disdain for partners and allies, well, actually you need diplomacy because you need to talk to each other, and you need partners and allies if you can't do a thing yourself. So while he's working out in real time how diplomacy works, I think that the rest of us should be encouraging the US to have a very clear set of what its objectives are in this war, and then to be using diplomatic channels to try to open up a lifeline for the whole world in terms of oil.
Just to return to supply for the moment, Melissa, Singapore's always mentioned in connection with Australia's fuel supply. How much of our fuel comes from there?
Yeah, so we're lucky in a way in that our refined fuel comes from much closer to home, from Singapore, Malaysia, etc. We do get, however, they get some of that oil, obviously, through the Straits of Hormuz. I think, for me, one of the most interesting things about this is thinking about the way that NATO is responding and the Europeans are responding. So they have the same sort of dependency that, Australia does. They have a lot of oil that's coming to them. But they're looking at this and saying, well, no, this was actually an illegal war to start with. Spain has been very clear on that. Or even if they're not willing to go that far, they say, look, you've got to use diplomacy. We were not consulted about you going into this war. Coming now and demanding that we get involved is a bit rich. And NATO is a mutual defence pact, not a mutual attack pact. If any one of the countries of NATO is invaded, such as Greenland were to be invaded, then we will defend each other. But that does not mean we are going to support you in a more expeditionary war like this.
Is there any precedents, Melissa, for this proposal from Donald Trump? Have we seen this sort of cooperation before at any time?
Look, it is possible. And for example, in that area, there has been long-term European cooperation, which Australia has been involved in things like anti-piracy operations. So if countries choose and agree to work together on a common problem, they absolutely can do so. But in this case, with the war raging, everyone would be concerned that they're being dragged into it. For me, one of the most interesting interesting players in this is thinking about India. So India is very, very dependent upon oil coming from Straits of Hormuz. They're also a real friend of Iran. So when I was in India recently, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Iran was there. They, at the moment, are negotiating access for their own Indian ships, but they could actually play a useful role in brokering an agreement. And if I think of another example, like you asked, I would look at things like with the Ukraine war and making sure that shipments of wheat could still get out. There was a role in coming up with a limited ceasefire to enable that to happen, because the impact of things like wheat or things like oil, not just on Australia, but on the world's very poorest, is huge. And so anything that can be done to try to limit the scope of the war and keep those supplies happening would be a good service.
Melissa Conley-Tyler, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.